Joining us now in studio is the congressman from Maryland's 8th Congressional District and the top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, Jamie Raskin. Great to see you.
I'm delighted to be with you, Tommy.
Thank you for being here in person in Los Angeles. Sorry it's not warmer out.
Well, it's better than in D.C. where
Yeah.
we say it's not the heat, it's the stupidity.
Well said. So Dan Pfeiffer just spoke with your fellow Maryland delegation member, Senator Chris Van Hollen. He is in El Salvador right now trying to meet with Kilmar Obrego Garcia, the Maryland man who even the Trump administration has admitted was wrongly sent to El Salvador. The Supreme Court has ordered the administration to facilitate his return, but the White House so far has refused. If that continues, what can Congress do to put pressure on the White House or the government of El Salvador to bring him back?
Well, first, they admitted in court that he was wrongly detained and transported to El Salvador. They confessed it was an administrative error. In public now, they are saying that he was rightfully taken down there, and they're making up various stories about him. But he's basically like a disappeared person. I mean, that's what happens in authoritarian societies where you get swept off the street and then taken to whereabouts unknown.
Yeah.
Look, we have the problem that they still have a couple vote majority in the House and in the Senate. But we're going to do everything in our power to get him back, including sending other members down there to go and try to get in. But it's a lawless situation, and we have to see to it that the Supreme Court's 9-0 decision is actually enforced. There's no argument for what the administration has done here, none whatsoever, which is why you even had Thomas and Alito in the right wing on the court agreeing there's got to be due process. Otherwise, we are living in an authoritarian police state. If anybody can be swept off the street and just transported to a torturer's prison in another country, then all is lost, because if they can do it to a non-citizen, they can do it to a citizen, because the only way you can prove you're a citizen is if you have a hearing.
Right. The due process. Yeah, and Trump has now repeatedly said that he is interested in sending American citizens to this very same prison, potentially other foreign prisons. You're a former constitutional law professor. Where does that idea land on the range from unconstitutional to constitutional?
It's almost certainly unconstitutional. I mean, there was a form of punishment called banishment that existed in the colonial era, where people would be banished from their community and exiled. And I suppose that's what they're talking about doing. The Supreme Court, or any rational Supreme Court, I should say, would probably find that this violates the ban on cruel and unusual punishment in the Eighth Amendment. But in any event, it certainly violates due process to send anybody to a foreign prison, or a domestic prison for that matter, without due process, without a hearing. That's what due process means. And these are the two most beautiful words in the English language, because that's what stands between us and arbitrary dictatorial power. If anybody were to go down the road of trying to create foreign prisons for American citizens, it would have to be the United States Congress, because we are the lawmaking power. So this is another constitutional principle that gets trampled in the process. It's not up to the president to just make up some idea of foreign prisons and start it. The Supreme Court said in the Steele seizure case in 1952, the president derives his powers from only two places. One, the Constitution. There's nothing in the Constitution that gives the president the right to do that. And two, an act of Congress authorizing the president to do it. And that, of course, has not happened either. So it's a violation of the separation of powers, a usurpation of congressional lawmaking power, and almost certainly a brutal violation of due process and of the Eighth Amendment ban on cruel and unusual punishment.
Did you see these reports that Eric Prince, who folks might recall was the head of Blackwater, which is this private mercenary group that was responsible for a horrific massacre in Iraq in 2007, that I think irreparably damaged the U.S. relationship with the Iraqi government and the Iraqi people and was horrific in its own right. But apparently Eric Prince and some defense contractors are pitching the White House on the idea of building more prisons in El Salvador and maybe declaring some of the territory down there to be U.S. soil to get around some of the legal provisions you're talking about. Does any of that strike you as potentially legal?
Not very, no. We're living in something like a gangster state right now, where people like Eric Prince think that they've got the right to take taxpayer resources to set up offshore prisons and justice systems or injustice systems that have nothing to do with the American rule of law and a due process. So I imagine that they look at Guantanamo Bay as some kind of towering example of what they'd like to reproduce all over the world. We have to stop that, obviously, to prevent a slide into complete dictatorship. Look, Donald Trump is a convicted criminal. Could he be sent off to a foreign prison?
Good question.
You're separating people from their families. You're separating people from their lawyers, implicating the right to counsel. And you're engaging in a form of punishment, banishment, which hasn't been seen for centuries, really.
Into a prison where it's well known that people are tortured and killed. I'm interested in ways that Democrats can push back now. I realize that we do not have majorities in either the House or the Senate. It's very challenging. But I was talking to a very smart Latin America policy expert earlier this week who suggested to me that Democrats should threaten to take action against any foreign government that participates in the extraordinary rendition of American citizens. The idea being, we say to them, look, if you mess with American citizens, we will cut off future assistance. We will seek to prosecute foreign officials involved in these illegal actions. Basically, we publicly warn these leaders, Trump's in power now. We're going to be back at some point, maybe in the midterms. We're keeping score. Thoughts on that idea?
Well, that's right. We should be talking about cutting off aid to El Salvador right now. The whole idea that Bukele doesn't have any power to return an American prisoner who was sent to him under an agreement where he's getting paid $6 million by America is ridiculous. He's our legal agent in this dubious arrangement they've created.
Right.
Of course, he's got the power to return them. So he and Trump are just acting like a couple of dictators having fun at the expense of a man's life and his family, and they want to be able to do that all over the place. So I like that idea, and it's a complement to something that we need to be doing right now, which is engaging in far more work of transnational democratic solidarity with the democratic governments and the democratic movements and peoples and parties of the world.
Totally agree.
To try to prevent the spread of the lawlessness and the fascist chaos that's been unleashed against us. But implicit in it should be the idea that if and when we come back to power, and we will, we are not going to look kindly upon people who facilitated, to use a word of the day, who facilitated authoritarianism in our country. Because that's an assault on our Constitution and on our people.
Yeah, I hope we can effectuate that outcome. You talked about this. Some nerdy jokes there. An anonymous House Democrat told Axios that Democrats are falling into a trap set by Trump by talking about these deportations. This is a quote from that story, an anonymous quote, but a quote. Rather than talking about the tariff policy and the economy, we're going to take the bait for one hairdresser. That's a reference, I believe, to André Hernandez Ramiro, a gay Venezuelan makeup artist who the White House baselessly called a member of Tren de Aragua and sent to El Salvador. Your response to this anonymous political advice?
My response is we're going to beat them on all fronts. We're going to beat them on the tariffs, which were economically catastrophic for our country and for the world and utterly destabilizing of world trade, and also lawless and unconstitutional outside of the president's powers. We're going to beat them on his massive assaults on the rights of federal workers in the civil service, and we're going to beat them in court and in the court of public opinion on their assaults on the due process rights of people in America, whether they're citizens or non-citizens. In other words, we can't ration justice here. And this is why we need all hands on deck, and everybody needs to be fighting at every turn, every battle. And, a victory for one is a victory for all. And, we're going to hang together or we're going to hang separately, and we're going to hang together.
Yeah. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, is busy revoking the valid green cards and visas of students who express views the administration disagrees with. People like Rumeysa Ozturk, who's the Tufts University student who a bunch of masked ICE agents grabbed off the street, sent to a detention center in Louisiana for signing an op-ed that was pretty banal, frankly, and critical of the university's stance in Israel or the war in Gaza. I've seen reports that as many as 1,000 students foreign students have had their visas revoked. Obviously, we're talking about foreign nationals in that case, but what do you think the impact on free speech in this country is when you're seeing these kind of roundup and attacks on, opinion?
I mean, it's totally scandalous situation with the assault on free speech. It is like the Alien and Sedition Act period of the late 1790s, where the attack on immigrants became an attack on people considered political enemies of the government, dissidents. I'm very cheered by the tremendous support that she is getting, that all of these students are getting across the board here. In fact, there are a lot of Jewish student groups who are coming out very strongly and speaking up for her, and Mahmoud Khalil and others who are the subject of outrageous government harassment and retaliation simply because of their speech. They wrote an op-ed, they appeared at a rally. And what's fascinating is, unlike the hundreds of violent insurrectionists, Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, extremists who Donald Trump pardoned, people who violently assaulted police officers, none of these people engaged in any violence at all.
Right.
All they had done was to write an op-ed or to speak in a way that is officially disapproved by our new authoritarians in America. So it's very important as a matter of civil liberties for everybody to speak up for them. And I've been moved over the last few days to see the Jewish groups coming out and saying, don't try to deport these people and destroy their lives and uproot them in the name of fighting anti-Semitism. You're not doing anything about anti-Semitism, and you're going to inflame things much worse in the country by what you're doing.
Yeah, I was wondering, it feels like there's a real frightening weaponization of the charge of anti-Semitism happening. I mean, one recent example I saw was, do you know who Miss Rachel is?
No.
Anyone with a 3-year-old or younger currently knows Miss Rachel because she's a former teacher. She makes educational content for kids, puts it up on YouTube. Her episodes have gotten over 10 billion views, half of them at my house. But so last week, this group, they call themselves Stop Anti-Semitism. They're known for doxing students, accusing them for being anti-Israel. They sent a letter to the Attorney General, to Pam Bondi, asking her to investigate whether Miss Rachel was getting, quote, paid to disseminate Hamas-aligned propaganda to her millions of followers, as this may violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Now, that sentence is stupid on so many levels. She's not posting pro-Hamas content. She's posting like love and care for all kids, including Israeli kids, including the Bibas family that was being held hostage. Also, you can't register under FARA for Hamas. This is self-evidently ridiculous. But there are these organizations that are flagging foreign students, going after people like Miss Rachel, and then asking the U.S. government to deport them, to investigate them, to use the awesome power of the state to punish them. And
apparently some of these students who've been targeted by ICE for removal were first identified by various right-wing projects allegedly pursuing anti-Semitism. But, on that understanding you just identified, there are people who are being called anti-Semites simply for speaking out for a two-state solution and recognition of human rights on the Palestinian side and the Israeli side, and the necessity for mutual security.
Right.
I mean, that's just scandalous. And so, this is a period like Salem witchcraft trials, where, you can just fling that charge at someone and then the right wing thinks that that's the end of the discussion. But I do think that the country is waking up. I think about what Jefferson said in that beautiful letter he wrote in 1798 to his friend John Taylor, who was expressing his consternation about what was going on in the country during that time. And Jefferson said, "A little patience and the reign of witches shall pass over, their spells dissolve, and the people recovering their true sight restore their government to its true principles."
Let's hope.
Yeah, let's hope that the reign of witches is passing over.
Yeah.
And no offense meant to any witches.
No, I'm thinking of Stephen Miller personally.
Yeah.
The changing gears a little bit, the Trump administration, they've handed over these ransom lists to various universities, including to Harvard University, They want to dictate things like diversity, equity, inclusion policies, student discipline, admissions requirements, a lot more. Harvard, to their great credit, refused, and the administration has cut off $2.2 billion in federal funding. CNN reported that the Trump administration is planning to rescind Harvard's nonprofit statuses. So Harvard's fighting.
Yeah.
You've seen other schools like Columbia cave even preemptively. What do you think is the best way to fight back, and like what's required here?
Everybody's got to summon up all of their institutional resources and personal courage to fight back as much as you can. And I'm very proud of Harvard, I got to say. And I'm speaking as a graduate of the college and the law school. And I spent a lot of my years in school fighting against Harvard because they refused to divest their money from apartheid South Africa. And they were just totally on the wrong side there. And I called them out. And I was ashamed that Harvard did not do the right thing and follow what Nelson Mandela and Bishop Tutu and the people struggling for freedom there were asking for. But I've got to say, in this situation, I'm beaming with pride about Harvard standing up. Look, Donald Trump spent a lot of time in real estate in New York City, a lot of time in casinos in Atlantic City. He knows what a mob shakedown is. This is a mob shakedown against the universities. It's a mob shakedown against the law firms, against the lawyers, and he's seeing how far he can push it. And it's undoubtedly a terrifying thing for, even big law firms to go through, even big universities to go through. But now is the moment when you get to prove why you're a lawyer. Now you get to prove why you're a college president or a university administrator. You can stand up for academic freedom. You can stand up for the Constitution. And these judges are proving why they're judges. There are 78 preliminary injunctions and temporary restraining orders right now against the lawlessness in the chaos unleashed by Donald Trump. And they're threatening judges. And you go online, you see all kinds of violent threats against judges. Justice Amy Coney Barrett's sister got a bomb threat. There are other people on the Supreme Court and other judges who've received death threats that are taking place. And I've got colleagues who have wanted posters up outside of their offices. In the Cannon House office building. These judges are wanted, and they want to impeach them just for standing in Donald Trump's way. They never tell you, by the way, substantively what's wrong with a particular opinion.
Right.
Like what's wrong with the 4 opinions rendered against Donald Trump's attempt to nullify birthright citizenship in America, one from an Obama judge, one from a Biden judge, one from a Reagan judge, and one from a Bush judge. And the Reagan judge said, this is the easiest case I've decided in 4 decades on the bench. This is blatantly unconstitutional. The first sentence of the 14th Amendment reads, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. Like, what don't you understand about that? You don't even have to be a lawyer. You just have to know how to read to get that. And these judges are just like over the top angry about what's going on. And yet they turn around and say there's something wrong with the judges. They're saying, well, we got to impeach them. I think, everybody in the administration, J.D. Vance, all of them. Yeah. Trump tweeted about impeaching them. They say this is a record number of court decisions against a president, a record number of injunctions against a president. Yes, and it's a record number of violations of the Constitution by a president. So if you don't like this tsunami, they call it, of opinions against the president, then call off your tsunami constitutional crime wave against the American people.
There's this rolling debate about whether this is a constitutional crisis. And I feel like part of the reason there's a rolling debate is no one's completely defined what that means. Do you have a definition and an opinion on whether we're in one?
Well, I think it's a hopelessly vague and abstract term. So when people say, are we in a constitutional crisis? I say we are experiencing an unprecedented, sweeping and comprehensive attack on the Constitution by the presidential administration. And so we have to defend every element of the Constitution: due process, equal protection, freedom of speech, the separation of powers, congressional powers, judicial independence, and so on. So, I suppose it's in the eye of the beholder. If it feels like a crisis to you, it's a crisis. But the point is, it's under attack, and we've got to defend it.
Yeah. One way we have been fighting back, Democrats, is holding town hall meetings in Republican districts. You recently hosted one in Maryland calling out Andy Harris, congressman from the Eastern Shore of Maryland for being MIA. My father-in-law was there, by the way. Shout out Chris Cook. He said it was a packed crowd. You gave a great speech and the people were just amped. But if we're being honest, Democrats have been trying and failing to defeat Andy Harris for over a decade. Why do you think this time will be different? Can we take him out this time? Can we take out these
Well, I believe that Heather Mazier got, I think it was 54-46 in the 1st District of Maryland. So we're closing in on the target. There are a lot of people from my district in Montgomery County and the D.C. area and the Baltimore area moving to the Eastern Shore in retirement. And there's an incredible new Eastern Shore Indivisible group that I met with out there. So we don't give up on any congressional district or any state legislative district. We won that great state Senate race in Pennsylvania that nobody expected us to win, the Wisconsin race. And even in Florida, we were disappointed that we didn't win those 2 House seats, but we went up 15 or 16 points, which then builds for the future. So no good act is wasted in this process. And there were some very creative political art representations at that event when I went out there. They brought up a huge milk carton with Andy Harris's face on it. And I just said, hey, if your name is on the ballot, your face should not be on the milk carton.
That's right. That's great. Yeah. So last question for you. So in the before times, the dividing line between Democrats was on policy, moderate, left, center left. Now it seems to be divided on who is fighting hard, who is saying kind of keep some powder dry. I would put you in the fight hard on everything all the time kind of side of the ledger. Why is that the right place to be? And can you help define for others listening, members of Congress, elected officials, average citizens, what it looks like in practice, how they can emulate that?
Well, let's just say that because we're experiencing an attempted authoritarian takeover of American society, the job has changed, right? There were people on all sides who thought the job is you stay in touch with your constituents and you go and you push a red button or a green button, and that's your job. That's not our job anymore. We are organizers. We are organizers, and we've got to be leaders of a nationwide popular movement to arrest the descent into fascism in America. And we haven't even gotten a chance to talk about Elon Musk and the Silicon Valley people, because these people really believe that democracy is defunct. They say we live in a post-constitutional America. And if you listen to their intellectual guru, Curtis Yarvin, he did an interview with the New York Times about a month ago where he said the American people have got to get over their fear of the word dictatorship. He said the corporations are just dictatorships of the CEO. And just like we have CEOs dictatorships in the private sector, we need to have a dictator for the government. And by the way, that dictator does not serve the people. That dictator serves the other dictators. They're talking about a corporate state, and they're being very unvarnished and explicit about it. So our jobs have changed. It's not enough just to go and cast our votes and to write a monthly newsletter. We've got to be involved 7 days a week in the struggle to defend constitutional democracy in America. And when I say that, I believe constitutional democracy is not just a structure of laws and constitutional principles and practices. It is that, but it's more than that, because constitutional democracy is always an unfolding and unfinished project. And if we're not moving forward, like Tocqueville warned in Democracy in America, we're going to be lapsing back into some other autocratic or monarchical aristocratic form of government. We got to be moving forward. So, you got to hand it Donald Trump. At least he's talking about Greenland and Canada and Panama. He's not talking about anything democratic. He's talking about taking them over like a dictator. Well, we've got to put on the agenda the millions of disenfranchised people in America. We need statehood for Washington, D.C. We need statehood for Puerto Rico. We need a constitutional amendment guaranteeing everybody a right to vote. We need to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. We can't be in a constant quicksand struggle against voter suppression tactics. And they're trying it again for 2026 and 2028. And the SAVE Act, which would conceivably disenfranchise millions of American women because, you've got to show when you go to the polls now, your birth certificate, your driver's license, or a passport. And if they don't match your birth certificate, then you got to show your marriage certificate.
Oh, wow.
And 80% of American women change their last name. So they've got to bring their marriage certificate along with everything else. It's just more obstacles to voting for the people that they think are not going to vote for them. So we got to deal with that. So I just believe, I'm kind of with John Dewey, who said that, the only solution to the ills of democracy is more democracy. And what we're suffering from today is not democracy, but it's all of these attacks on it and all of these obstacles to it. But we do need to be not just legislative representatives, which is hard enough, but we've got to be movement leaders along with everybody in the streets and everybody in the state capitals and the city halls and the church halls and the union halls across America.
Couldn't agree more. Well, Congressman, thank you so much for all you're doing to fight and push back on these monsters and for being here. We appreciate it.
It's great to be with you, Tommy. Keep up the great work because the press is not the enemy of the people. The press is the people's best friend.
Agreed.
And we need you.
Thank you.